Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to Wednesday Inspiration from North Congregational Church for June 29th, 2022. I'm the Reverend Dr. Mary Biedron, and I am recording once again in advance for you to see. By the time you are watching this, I will be winging my way back from our national meeting in Wichita, Kansas, the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches, which is the cooperative alliance or association of congregational churches, not to rule over one another, but instead to collaborate with one another. And the collaboration has produced some pretty great things in the world, and I'm looking forward to telling everybody all about that on Sunday mornings after I get back. But for now, we are going to continue with the saga of Lady Wisdom. I'm once again going to read from the Message. This is a contemporary translation by Eugene Peterson from the original Hebrew. And we have been talking about Lady Wisdom. So this part of Proverbs is not as well known, and I'm sorry that it's not. So I wanted to really lift it up because the whole idea of wisdom, I think, is something that we are trying to grasp onto right now in our culture, and finding that we come up with thin gruel because we haven't spent time thinking about what does it mean to be wise, not just knowledgeable, but wise. And we've heard how wisdom is good sense, that wisdom comes with the virtue to enact it, that wisdom is the source of good things and good outcomes, and that we can find wisdom when righteousness and justice intersect. And so today we're going to hear from the book of Proverbs. Let me look at my notes here again. Chapter 8, verses 22 through 31. Lady Wisdom is going on and introducing herself and talking about her place in the order of things. God sovereignly made me, says Lady Wisdom, the first, the basic, before he did anything else. I was brought into being a long time ago, well before the earth got its start. I arrived on the scene before ocean. Yes, even before springs and rivers and lakes, before mountains were sculpted and hills took shape. I was already there, newborn. Long before God stretched out earth's horizons and tended to the minute details of soil and weather and set sky firmly in place, I was there. When God mapped and gave borders to the wild ocean, built the vast vault of heaven, and installed the fountains that fed the ocean, when God drew a boundary for the sea and posted a sign that said no trespassing, and then staked out earth's foundations, I was right there with him, making sure that everything fit. Day after day I was there, my joyful applause, always enjoying his company, delighted with the world of things and creatures, happily celebrating the human family. So this is an interesting concept, that wisdom is part of creation. It does not say that in the book of Genesis, but of course, not only is the Bible composed of many different experiences from many different periods of time, but also reflects only a portion of many of the practices and the ways that the people of God have come to understand God's presence in this world. It is a guidebook or a blueprint, but it is not firm and cast in stone, and instead is something meant to be lived and experienced. And that's what wisdom is saying, that everything that there is began first with the wisdom of God, if you can imagine such a thing, that everything was created with wisdom. Now, I understand that the creation story in the Bible is an ancient way of understanding how people were made in God's image and then somehow lost the favor of God, how we were made to be good and yet became not good, in fact, sometimes terrible. That is more important, to be frank, than worrying about whether you can correspond the eons of evolution with the story of creation. It is much more important to use our wisdom given to us from God to understand that the creation story is about how we are God's creation. Understand that God permeates everything, and the methodology of which that happens is not nearly as important than the idea that it does happen, that the power of love brought to us through wisdom is the driving force of the whole universe, of the whole earth, and of everything in it. So wisdom talks about this, about even before the oceans came and the springs came, before God worried about soil and all of these other things, when the earth was mapped out, wisdom was present. I think that it's interesting when you look at the way the world is, that it makes as much sense as it does. Not us, we're pretty odd, but think of our bodies, about how many things have to work right in order for us to work. Think of the beauty of the fractal opening of a fiddlehead fern or that ammonite shell and so many other places that this mathematical equation is expressed in visual things. Think of the way that we have both the regularity of the seasons and the rising and the setting of the sun and the rising and the setting of the moon, and yet also variety, the phases of the moon, the seasons of the year, the change, and yet also the rhythm of life. All of these things are amazing, and they are even more amazing when we think about the wisdom that lies beneath them, the wisdom that they can bring to us. When God staked out the earth's foundations, wisdom was there. Wisdom is part of what creation is, stitched and bound into every single part of it. And wisdom celebrated the creation of humanity, of the creatures made in God's image, of the creatures into which God breathed life and breathed wisdom, us. So how might we use wisdom to find our way back to that place? How might we begin to discover what wisdom can teach us about the wisdom of creation, about how we are all connected, about how we are part of this earth, how we are part of all humanity, how we are all part of one another? I think this is a really important message for us out of creation, out of the creation story, and also out of this wisdom story, to understand an embodied spirituality. We are not meant to be somehow just floating off ethereal. Our flesh is not evil. That was what the Greeks believed, but that is not what Hebrew religion taught. And our bodies are meant to be enjoyed and used and celebrated. One of the criticisms of Jesus was that he ate and drank with sinners, that he had a good time, that he celebrated life, because we are meant to do that too. And so we need to find ways that we can celebrate life and yet use our wisdom to celebrate it without knocking down someone else, without having to have something to which we can compare ourselves, but instead just glorying in the beauty of creation. So today, I'm going to let you think about that whole idea that maybe we don't need to compare ourselves to others, that maybe the building up of one person does not mean that we are less, but instead that the world is more. What love is like is not slices taken out of a cake, but instead like the candles on top of it. The more there are, the brighter it burns. The more there are, the more beautiful it is. The more there are, the more years you've achieved, the more has happened. And so, we're going to hear in a moment the hymn, "O thou for 1,000 tongues to sing." Again, celebrating the whole idea that God's praise would be even more and more glorious the more and more people gave it. So we'll hear Pat Butler on the North Church organ and then be back for prayer. Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise, the glories of his righteousness, the wonders of his grace. Great words from Wesley and great words to live by. And so, with those great words in mind, let us open our hearts in prayer. Oh God, we do sing your praise. We lift up our hearts, we see the beauty of creation, and we think of the wonder that you have made all these things through the power of your wisdom, and that all of these things have relationship with one another and with us. Yet somehow we are also made in your image. We are given spirits that go beyond the realm of this world, and we are given wisdom to help to govern the ways that our immortal spirit and our mortal selves can meet up and live lives that are productive and lived in service of love of God and love of neighbor. Sometimes that's hard, O God, and so give us the gift of wisdom. Remind us that she is calling out in the streets, that she is trailing after us, though she came before us, so that we may begin to walk in your holy ways, so that we may offer help to the helpless and hope to the hopeless, so that we may find ways to use our resources to give food to the hungry and homes to the homeless, so that we may use what we have as your combined people to bring peace on earth to the places where there is no peace. Though we may not have the immediate solution for global conflicts, each one of us can do something to bring peace on earth. And God, show us how to have the wisdom to know what those things are. We hear the story of Lady Wisdom being present from creation, and we give thanks for the beauty of this creation, for the beauty of a summer's day, for the heat of summer finally coming upon us, for the different ways that we can discover the fruitfulness of the earth, even as we also know that the earth can be a violent place, that there are earthquakes and floods and fires, that there are droughts, that there are things that threaten human life. And so help us to see those things in awe, but also always having care for our neighbors, to understand that the whole world is our neighbor and that each person should be of special care to us. Show us how to see one another as you see us, made in your image, not perfect, but instead beloved. Help us to have that power of wisdom so that we may have knowledge, and give us the virtue that we need to use that wisdom correctly, that we need to choose our actions in ways that are consistent with the way that you have designed this world. We thank you and praise you for the power of love that has come into our hearts and our minds, for the ways that Jesus taught us to love one another as you have loved us. And so, God, help us to always remember that. When we fail to love enough, forgive us. When we encounter someone else whose love has run dry, help us to sit with them and fill it up again. When we struggle to love one another because we don't feel we can, give us the wisdom to understand how we can have compassion for those people. And over again, remind us that we are all of us, recipients of your lavish grace, given to us before we were ever good, given to us out of your own divine wisdom, given to us out of your eternal fountain of love. And so you hear our prayer as we use the words that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I hope that you're enjoying this series on wisdom. We have a few more weeks where we will hear about the gifts of wisdom and the ways that wisdom reaches out and spreads a table for us and creates an environment where we can learn and grow. And then I hope you will take that good news about God's love alongside God's wisdom out into the world with you. And may God be with you until we meet again.